even though we didn't discuss it, at the end of Golem's Eye, what do we see happen? And the reason I've got to kind of begin with that, and we're not going to discuss the end of it very long, I'm just kind of getting to a point, is because it gives us an indication as to why this book begins the way it does and why we see Bartimaeus the way he is at the beginning of this book. Not at the beginning, 165 BC or 156 BC, whatever it is, Egypt, but at the beginning in south of London. Okay, who stops the golem? How?
She pulled the script out of his mouth and pulled the eye off his head.
And why did she do that?
To save Nathaniel.
So, Kitty saves Nathaniel. And notice, you get that in that passage, you know, she sees Nathaniel is essentially knocked out because she tries to use the staff. He can't, he doesn't have the power yet. And there's Bartimaeus, and Bartimaeus has been given a command, but the command wasn't specific enough for him to actually stop her. And he says, you know, he's not going to be out for long. It'd be worth your while to, you know, leave while you can. And she says, he wouldn't save me, would he? He says, no, he probably wouldn't. Okay. But she saves him. Why? What does she think of John Mandrake, which is how she knows him? What happened the last time they met? He attacked her, right? And she repels the attack, and she tells him, don't follow me or I'll kill you, etc. Well, he kind of does follow her, right? And she saves him. Why? What does her saving him tell us about Kitty? What problem does she have with the resistance before they all fall apart? You get that passage that we kind of discussed last week where, you know, Eva says we ought to get rid of the stuff that we steal. We ought to destroy it. Otherwise, we're just like them. And Pennyfeather says, you know, it's my group. Therefore, we do what I want. And he wants to use it. And he says, you know, we're not in any kind of moral danger by doing so. And yet, Kitty, you know, she has qualms about that. And then when they're raiding Gladstone's tomb and everybody's kind of piling into the coffin, what is she doing? She's kind of standing off to the side like this, feeling like, really? Is this what we're all about? Tomb raiders? Is that it? So, go back to my question. Why does she rescue Nathaniel? Why does she save him? Bingo. She's not like them. John says at one point, and I use that name intentionally. John says at one point to a couple of his imps that he's had out, you know, masquerading as children. And the imps have said, you know, they can see through us. They tell us to be gone, foul, you know, demon, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what happened to common humanity? Kind of interesting question for him to ask, because he's not treating commoners as having humanity. Okay? We see Bartimaeus in this fight down in Suffolk. Okay? Page 15. He's getting his you-know-what handed to him. And we're told one of the other demons says, bottom of page 14, dear me, a voice chuckled, a damsel in distress. I should have mentioned that in contrast to all the centaurs and ogres at my side, I'd been wearing a human guise that night. It happened to be that of a girl. Slender, long dark hair, feisty expression. Not based on anybody in particular, of course. What have we seen in the past when Bartimaeus takes on human form Whose form does he take on? Ptolemy. And now he adds another, character to his repertoire, if you want. Why? Who is this? It's Kitty. So why does he take on Kitty's form?
Cares about her.
He cares about her. He likes her. This girl's got style. This girl's got spunk. This girl's got what? Something demons aren't supposed to have. Humanity? Heart. She has conscience. He's going to say in a few moments about Mandrake, that the conscience isn't dead yet. It's still there. In fact, part of it's come a little bit more alive since definitely the end of the first book, somewhat since the end of the second book. Because what does John know? What does Mandrake know about Kitty now? Right now, page 15 in this book.
She's dead.
Why does he think that? Because that's what Bartimaeus told him. She's dead. But he still can't understand, because he understands, or he knows she saved him, but he can't understand why. So, we're going to go on. We're going to skip a bunch. So, Mandrake now, let's go on to the next chapter, 21 or so. What's happened in the last year? Okay, I had up on the board over here the other day, I had the government, commoners, etc. Government's mostly the same. A couple of positions have changed a little bit. What happened? Who's the new chief of police? Devereaux. Why? What happened to Henry Duval? He died.
Yeah. The golem ate him up.
Who was behind the golem? Duval was. Okay. So he's dead. So Devereaux is now prime minister and acting chief of police. Usually you kind of want to keep those two, you wouldn't want, well, I know hell a lot of people wouldn't want Trump in charge of both, presidency and, let's say, acting FBI director. Or even better than that, president and acting attorney general. Because that means everybody within the legal system ultimately answers to him, okay? From the government side, at least. I mean, if you're a private lawyer, you don't answer to him, so to speak, okay? What's John now? Because he had been, what? Assistant to Julius Tallow, Minister of Internal Affairs. Now he is Information Minister. Do we have an Information Minister in the United States? Or Secretary of Information? No, we don't. We have a White House press secretary who's the spokesperson for the White House and the government overall. There's an individual spokesperson for the Pentagon and the State Department, things like that. We don't have a cabinet level bureaucracy of government that is information. Why? First Amendment. And what does the First Amendment guarantee? Freedom of the press. The press is our so-called information ministry. It's what's called the Fourth Estate. It is totally, however, separate from the government. Why? Louder. So they won't control it. So the government won't control it. Because what happens if the government does control the press? A lot of information, a lot of things that are happening, the information won't get out about it. Or, flip side of that, a lot of we get told will be what? Use this word, propaganda. Okay? Pretty much any country, every country that has a minister of information, you need to throw dis in front of information. Minister of disinformation. Why? Because the whole purpose of that job is to not tell you what is really going on. Here's our example. What is John in charge of really? What's he selling to the public? How's the war going? Terribly. And yet, what does the government say? Does the government say, war's going horribly, we're losing, in fact, we're not only losing over in the colonies, we're losing around the world. No, it's not saying that. Okay? So, John now has an assistant, okay, Piper, and page 21. He opens the envelope from Devereux and says, it beggars belief. The war is going badly, the empire is teetering on the brink, and all our prime minister can think about is plays and parties. Okay. So, he's trying to think up a slogan. Got a pen? How about fight for freedom in the British way? Yeah. Doesn't mean anything. Sounds good. Fight for freedom in the British way. Doesn't mean anything. Why? How free are commoners? They're the ones fighting for freedom. Okay? How much of the British way do they get? None. Okay? So, we get another description of him. He's changed a little bit since the last book. He's still kind of slim, slender. But now, he's 17 years old. Previous book, he was coming up on 15. Okay? A couple of years have passed. And he's cut his hair short. Military style, we're told. Page 22. To peers and inferiors alike, he was courteous, charming at all times, although a little remote, as if distracted by an inner melancholy. He wears his hair short in a close military crop, conscious innovation to honor the men and women still at war. It had been a successful gesture. Why? Spies noted that among commoners, he was the most popular magician. He looks the part. He makes everyone think he cares. Mandrake was considered by his rivals to be formidably, indeed dangerously talented. Okay, notice, what's the difference between formidably and dangerously? If somebody's formidable, they're respected, means they're powerful. If they're dangerous, that means that formidity, if you want, or that formidableness can what? Be used to harm you. So it's not just that they respect him, it's whatever they do, they're kind of keeping an eye on him. In fact, we're told, following his promotion to information minister, they responded accordingly. But each attempted assassination had been cursorily rebuffed. Notice, each implies what? There's been more than one. In fact, after a number of these attempted assassinations, what does he finally do? He issues a public challenge. Like in the newspaper. If you want to take me on, be with me at XYZ place and let's have it out. And nobody steps up. Okay? So what does that do? It just raises his estimation in the eyes of the public higher. Okay? So, let's see here. He talks with Bartimaeus. We're going to skip a bit. Actually, not Bartimaeus. One of his other afrits and such. 27. They tell him, children are seeing us. Let's see here. And bottom of page 29. Piper's keeping a tab of the number of times a demon is seen by a commoner. Not the number of times an individual demon, but the number of different commoners are seeing demons. And she says, page 29 at the bottom, these are the unauthorized demon sightings of the last 6 months. 43, because of what Aspel just told him. As far as the demons go, there's no pattern. We've had afrits, jinn, imps, and mites all spotted. But when you look at the commoners, most are children. Okay? So children are somehow being able to see these things. And most of these children are young. 30 cases, the witnesses were under 18. What's that, 70% or so? Half of those were under 12. They're being born with it, with the power to see. Why is this significant? Well, Bartimaeus has already told John or Nathaniel what? After usually 100 or a couple hundred or maybe a few hundred years of magician rule, what happens? The commoners start to develop what Pennyfeather calls resilience. They start to develop these abilities, and what do? They overthrow the magicians, and then within a period of time, they start to learn the powers that the magicians learned. How? Learning to read, studying ancient texts. They start calling forth demons. They become the magicians, and the whole thing cycles through again. Okay? And I should mention, after Stroud wrote these books, he wrote another series of books, 7, I think, called something like the Lockwood Books or the Lockwood Files, something like that, that are set in London, England actually, set in England at kind of an unspecified time. Generally, it sounds like the late 1990s, early 2000s. And there is a problem rampant in England of ghosts. And the problem with the ghosts is nobody can see them except for children. I didn't make the connection until I was just kind of skimming, doing some rereading for this morning. And only children can. And once the children reach around the age of 18 or so, they stop being able to see the ghosts. Well, the problem there is a ghost can walk right up and touch you, and you become what's called ghost touched, which either one of two things happens. You go crazy or you go dead. Okay? And the ghosts can be little ordinary everyday ghosts. Say Jamari dies right now. Little ordinary everyday ghost. Or the ghost can be like what we would consider a demon-like ghost. And in this version of England, children, beginning ages about 6 up to 14, 15, 16, really pushing it, work as detectives to capture ghosts or send them on their way. That is, to make them dead. And then we kind of get into the Garth Nix thing, okay? Anyways, so go back to where we were. Chapter 3, we have Bartimaeus telling us he's been around essentially for 2 full years. Now, at the beginning of Golem's Eye, when Nathaniel finally gets around to summoning Bartimaeus, what does he agree with Bartimaeus?
Send him home, or send him back to the other realm.
When?
Place.
6 weeks. Give me 6 weeks. And he's now been around for 104. He's been around for 2 years. So Bartimaeus says, it's been 2 years since I've been allowed to leave this cursed earth. 2 full years. I needed more than a quiet kip on a chimney stack to deal with that. Why? Because if he doesn't go back, he'll die. Maintaining a physical form here drains a genie's essence. Okay? Page 32, he tells us what is happening to him. Okay? And we're going to skip a bunch. Pages 36 and 37. Okay? So Bartimaeus, and the stuff I skipped, tells us what's been happening with him, how he first got along with Nathaniel, etc. And then 36 and 37 tells us about what's happening with Nathaniel. So he gives us, his own personal kind of background history and then his master's. Okay? There followed a dismal, top of 37, a dismal sea change in my master's personality. By cruel paradox, he also began to summon me more and more frequently and for less and less reason. Why? Mainly, no doubt, because he wished to minimize the chances of my being summoned. Why? Because he doesn't want me to give up his birth name. Because just think what another magician could do if they knew his birth name. So, he says, what's John's problem? All he does is work. Moreover, he was now surrounded by a gang of vicious, hot-eyed maniacs, the other ministers, most of whom wished him harm. Okay? His only close associate, Quentin Makepeace. Notice the name, by the way. Makepeace. Sounds like he's what? A peacemaker. Okay? As self-serving as all the rest. And then we're told, all his old life, the years with the Underwoods, his vulnerable existence as the boy Nathaniel, the ideals he'd once espoused. What ideals? Because these are now buried deep down. Every link was severed, except for me. I don't think he could bring himself to break this last connection. That is, Bartimaeus is saying, the real reason he summoned me and kept me around, I'm his connection to what? His past. So why does Nathaniel want to be connected to his past? What is Bartimaeus saying about his past? Because that's what's tied to his ideals. Honor, responsibility, nobility. I think those are what Bartimaeus is saying are his buried ideals. And the way he keeps these kind of around, that is the way Nathaniel keeps these kind of around, is by keeping Bartimaeus around. He personally has buried them. But has he? How much does he really care for, quote unquote, government, or the members of the government, or the prime minister? Okay? So, he becomes, information ministry goes on. Page 40, Bartimaeus says, I did my best to get to him. Instead of using a monstrous guise like my fellow slaves, etc., I took to wearing the semblance of Kitty Jones. So what does he mean to get to? Does he mean literally, physically, to get from where he is to him? Or does he mean to get to him like when somebody gets on your nerves? So how does he get to him? I pretend I'm Kitty. Her assumed death still weighed on his conscience. I knew this because he always reacted to my echo of her face with a reddening of his own. So if his face reddens, what does that show? Nathaniel feels what? Shame. He feels ashamed that she has died. He'd get all angry and sheepish, assertive and embarrassed at the same time. Didn't make him treat me any better, mind. This is why Bartimaeus does it. Okay? It's to what? It's to keep that spark of conscience alive. So, several commenters talking about where he is. So when he says, I did my best to get to him, it's both senses. Yes, he is physically trying to get back to him, but he's also trying to get under his skin. Okay? So he thinks about Kitty, and we're told, page 41, despite appearances to the contrary, she hadn't died in battle with the golem 3 years before it, not a year before. Instead, after acting with unusual selflessness and bravery to save Mandrake's worthless hide, she'd slipped quietly away. He says, kind of let her, but she reminded me of someone. Deep down, I knew she was still close by, working against the magicians. Whatever she was doing, I hoped she was keeping out of trouble. And that's our segue. That's our natural introduction to what she is doing. Okay? So we're going to skip a bit. what is she doing now? It's 3 years later, working as a barkeep, or tending bar if you want. And she's also doing what? She's working with this old guy, Mr. Button, kind of cataloging his library. And what else? Every now and then she borrows a book. She knows how to read. She's reading it. What is she reading up on? Magic, magicians, demons, etc. Go to part 2. Notice part 2, like part 1, begins in ancient Alexandria. What did we see at the beginning of part 1? Ptolemy. And what happens to Ptolemy? Or does somebody attempt? Yeah, they attempt to assassinate him. Okay? So, part 2 begins, and Ptolemy is talking to Bartimaeus, page 62. And he asks, what is essence? What is essence? That's like saying, what is stuffness? What is matter? Because Bartimaeus talks about the difference between his essence in the other place and his, let's just call it here, his form here. Okay? So what's he getting at? Well, there's an old medieval notion, I think I might have discussed it in here before, about the difference between something's what's, it's about the difference between something's accidents and its substance. Okay? Its accidents is its form, shape, essentially its appearance. Its substance is its essence. It's what I'll call its isness. The thingness of whatever it is. So, for example, these sheets of paper. The appearance is what I just called them. Sheets of paper. What's the substance, the essence, the isness, however, of paper? That is, what is paper made from? Wood pulp. So it's tree, essentially. This t-shirt, its appearance is just that. It's a shirt. What's its essence? Cotton. Okay? This bottle. Appearance, form, shape, bottle. Its essence, petroleum. Or you can even go farther back. Its essence, dead dinosaur matter. Okay, because that's what petroleum's composed of. So he asks Bartimaeus, what is essence? What is he really asking? Yeah. What is being? What is, kind of? What is the essence of things? Okay? But he's asking that specifically of Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus. And then he goes on. Your substance. What is it? And how does it work? Oh, in the other place. Tell me about it. Is time there synchronous with ours? That is, if it's noon here, is it noon there? What form do its denizens take? Have they a king or a leader? Is it a dimension of solid substance or a whirling inferno or otherwise? What are the boundaries between your realm and this earth? And to what degree are they permeable? That is, can one go from this world to your world? Well, he's asking not just Jenny's, because it's clear they can, right? Notice, what is essence? What exactly your substance? What is it? He then has that paragraph, and then Bartimaeus says, why does Bartimaeus not have a, snappy rejoinder like he usually has for everything? Yeah, I know there's a wasp flying around. In short, Ptolemy was interested in us, jinn, his slaves, our inner nature, not the usual surface guff. In other words, he wants to know about us. That's why he doesn't have a snappy reply. He's never met anybody like this before. Okay, now this is 2,000 years previous to the novel. So Bartimaeus has still been around on Earth, a few times, 3,000 years. So he's had 3,000 years of human experience, and that 3,000 years of human experience has essentially taught him what? Humans don't give a rat's you-know-what about us. And here's this kid who does. He's trying to wrap his mind around that. So he asks him, why do you do, why all the questions? He says, I've read most of everything, so I've got more questions. Does my ambition surprise you? Yeah. It's not in your interests. What does Bartimaeus mean? To have the answers to this will not do what for Ptolemy? It will not further your purpose on earth. It will not add to your life. It will not add meaning to your life. It will not add riches to your life. It will not add power to your life. Ptolemy is partly getting at, why do we learn? And I don't mean in a classroom setting like this. I mean just learn. Ptolemy is essentially kind of suggesting, because we're inquisitive, because we're curious, we want to know. Bartimaeus is like, no, you're not. You're not really like that. You got to have an angle. There's got to be some purpose for it, okay? So, he tells Bartimaeus, I've heard that there are people up in the northern realms, shamans, who leave their own bodies to converse with spirits in another world. That seems pretty courteous to me. He says, to my mind, that is a much more courteous proceeding. Perhaps we too should learn this technique. Courteous. What does that word mean? It's good for you, it's good for me. We both win in that situation. Because now, if a human wants to discourse with a jinn, what must the human do? Forcibly pull that jinn out of the other place, force it into a pentacle, and then essentially command it to speak. How much free will is involved there on the part of the jinn? There's none. Right? So, Bartimaeus gives us a lot of background about Ptolemy, nephew to the king, etc., scholarly and such. Okay. We go on to chapter 5. We just kind of leave Ptolemy hanging there. So, one of his servants comes, tells him, I've seen Bartimaeus, and Mandrake asks him, page 68, what did Bartimaeus say? Can't tell you, you're that young. It was rude, mine. In other words, I can't repeat what he said. Okay? And then we're told, bottom of 68, top of 69, Nathaniel knows he should let Bartimaeus go. In all logic, he should let him go, but as always, he found the thought distasteful. Quite why was hard to say, since alone of all his slaves, the Jinni never treated him with anything approaching respect. Notice, alone of all his slaves. His abuse was tiring, exasperating beyond measure, and refreshing. Mandrake lived in a world where true emotions skulked forever behind politely smiling masks. Bartimaeus made no pretense of his dislike. Or does he? That is, might Bartimaeus's smarting off all the time, continually to Nathaniel indicates something other than dislike. If you've ever seen Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, it's a tale of two lovers, Beatrice and Benedict. The only problem is, as the play opens, and really through the first third or so, they don't realize they're in love. But they are madly in love. The reason they don't realize they're in love is all they do is snipe at each other, just continually. Okay? Benedict is this, great warrior, soldier, etc., etc. And Beatrice is the beautiful elder daughter, that men kind of, admire from afar, but they don't want to get too close because they know she has sharp claws. Okay? And she and Benedict just rat-a-tat-tat all the time. And everybody around them kind of like, look at these two. They know exactly what's going on. But the two of them can never admit it. Might there be some of the same going on here? That is, might Bartimaeus treat Nathaniel the way he does, not because of some erotic love, but because there is some deep-seated respect, that the kid can take it. Rascabal and Company, notice Bartimaeus made no pretense of his dislike. Rascabal and Company were emollient and fawning. Bartimaeus was impertinent now as the day he'd first met him, back when he was a child, owner of an entirely different name. And in his mind drifts away, almost like he's intentionally shutting those days out. And so Ascabel tells him, how he appeared, a dark-haired girl, pretty. No prizes for guessing to Jenny's disguise. Ever since Kitty Jones had died, Bartimaeus had used her shape to mock him. Is it to mock him? Not without success either. Even 3 years on, visualizing her face gave Mandrake a sharp pang in his side. Forget her. She was a traitor, dead and gone. But if she's a traitor, dead and gone, why does he feel bad? Okay? So, Mandrake's wrestling with the problem of, commoners who can see demons and such. And Jane Farrar comes in. Jane Farrar has risen somewhat. Before, previous book, she had been assistant to Henry Duval, who was chief of police. Now she is the deputy chief of police. So whereas he kind of didn't trust her before, now he really doesn't trust her, even though she still uses all the same tricks on him, seduction charms and things like that. Okay? And even though he's aware of it, he still keeps falling for it. Okay? So, they are trying to find let's see. No, let's not talk about that. Let's go on to page 84, where Bartimaeus has come back, and that's the part I'd skipped earlier. And remember, Nathaniel had thought of, he should send Bartimaeus back to the other place, but he doesn't. Page 84, find Hopkins. Don't act or attack. We know you're as weak as a weevil, Bartimaeus. Just find out where he is. Discover what they're up to. If you'll succeed, and he's interrupted by the telephone. Okay? So, my version of Kitty gritted her teeth. What about backup? If I get to this Hopkins, there will be more than an imp guarding him. He's just a scholar. If he's got defenses, we don't want you to wade in. I can send, backup. So he tells Bartimaeus he's going to be at Westminster Hall, okay, at Devereux's mansion in the evening. Tonight he'll be at his home. So in the afternoon, Westminster. In the evening, Devereux's. Later in the night, he'll be at his house, okay? So Bartimaeus now has to go find, who's Hopkins? We were introduced to him in the previous book.
For the staff, he was trying to get the staff.
Clem Hopkins, who wanted to get the staff for the mysterious person who met Kitty in the theater, okay, who wanted the staff and the cloak. Chapter 7. We start with Kitty reading from a book. Bartimaeus, by name of the demon Sacralgini, mentioned in Procopius, Michelot, etc., etc., etc. So she keeps reading, page 88. And now she's thinking about John Mandrake. Might get up to where I want to get to. We'll see. That was Mandrake's work. Propaganda, head of information now, to think she'd let him live. But it had been the Ginny Bartimaeus who had encouraged her to do it, to act to spare the magician's life. 3 years later, this still puzzled and intrigued her. Nothing she had known about demons had quite prepared her for Bartimaeus' personality. Notice, her thoughts are telling us Bartimaeus told her, spare his life. Their conversations, framed against a backdrop of fear and danger, remained fresh in her mind, full of vitality, insight, unexpected rapport. He had opened a door for her, giving her a glimpse of a historical process she had never guessed at. That is, the cycle of magicians, commoners overthrowing magicians, commoners becoming magicians, commoners over, etc. Thousands of years, during which time a dozen empires had risen to glory, waned, and crumbled. The pattern recurred again and again. Demons were summoned, magicians fought, stagnation set in, da-da-da-da-da. And she wants to know, can we break the cycle? Notice, what does Ptolemy ask? Up until this point. He doesn't ask, can we break the cycle? But he does ask, is there another way for us to commune with demons beyond our forcing demons to come? And he talks about the shamans of the north. She wants to make it so that people can't summon demons. Why? I think there's 2 reasons for that. 1, it's wrong to the demons. And 2, what would the effect be in our world?
Magicians would lose most of their power.
You wouldn't have that distinction between magicians and commoners. Everybody would be commoners at that point. Okay? So, Ptolemy thinks, is there some way we can have, shared enrichment kind of an idea? This community among demons and magicians without one forcing the other. And she just wants to, can we let demons be demons and us be common humans? Okay? We're going to skip a bunch. So she keeps reading. She reads about this other demon, page 92, Rakit, and 94, and she thinks, based upon the description, it's got to be the same. It's got to be Bartimaeus. Okay? 95, chapter 8. I'm trying to get us up to about 160 or so. We'll see. They have the party at Rupert Devereux's. Notice a round table, reasons of diplomacy, because what does a round table kind of always imply? Camelot, knights, everybody's equal. Because if you have a table like this, you have 2 heads of table. Okay? So, round table, everybody's equal. And there's a bunch of people there. Okay? War Minister, Mandrake's there, Jane Farrar's there, Ms. Whitwell, Collins. And we're hearing about the war and stuff. Mandrake's not listening. Page 97. Everything is out of control. And why isn't he listening? Because he's got his mind focused. We could stop these wars. We could reestablish an empire. How? exact middle, 97. Something decisive needed to be done, and soon, if the nation was to be saved. He knew what that something was: the staff of Gladstone. Weapon of incredible power, lay useless in the vaults below that very chamber. If wielded effectively, it would destroy the rebels, etc., etc. And he's thinking, could I do it? Could I use the staff? Doesn't know. He was the strongest magician in the room, with the possible exception of Whitwell. What does that tell us about him? I mean, is that a statement of fact or a statement of opinion? It's opinion. It's his opinion, which could mean a little bit of an inflated ego, which Bartimaeus frequently tells him he has. Okay? So, skip a little bit, go down to the 98, bottom of 98. There's Devereaux, Ferrari sitting next to him. She smiles. Her eyes are conspiratorial. She scribbles. Hopkins, news, presses it across to him. There's Jessica Whitwell. How well do she and Nathaniel get along now? Bottom of the paragraph, top of page 99. She and Mandrake regarded each other with respectful loathing. Why respectful? Why doesn't she just stomp on him like a bug? Because he's powerful. That's why she respects him. She loathes him for the same reason. He can be her undoing. Okay? We see the war minister, the foreign minister, etc., etc. And, Devereaux threatens Mortensen. He says, give us a year. He goes, you won't have a job in a year, etc., etc. Okay? Skip a bit. They keep talking. Jessica Whitwell says we should end the war, page 103, pull out from America. And Mortensen implies that what she has just said is treacherous. And we get this wonderful little description. A blue-gray glow erupted around Jessica Whitwell's clenched fist. The air hummed with a surge of unearthly force. Her voice was suddenly quiet. Would you be so good as to repeat that? And notice Carl doesn't. Why? Because he's a coward. It's also implying the kind of power she has. Okay? So they ask John what he thinks. And he tells them, what's he been daydreaming about during this whole war council? If I had the staff of Gladstone. And so he suggests using the staff. And in doing so, what happens to his reputation? What does Devereaux think? No. Why not? Is Devereaux strong enough to use it? I mean, what did Nathaniel tell us just a few moments ago? Who are the two most powerful ministers here? Himself and Jessica Whitwell. So do you think Devereaux is going to allow somebody else to use something that would give them, quote unquote, all power? No. Okay? So John says, why keep the staff, top of 105, under lock and key when it's the solution to our difficulties? Because I do not choose to use it. My word goes. Notice, I do not choose to use it. Okay? And then Nathaniel says, but I must ask why. Must? You must do nothing. You will know your place and not seek to destabilize this council with your inane theories. Now be silent and think before you speak again, lest I suspect you of having an agenda of your own. Now, that's getting pretty close to accusing him of treachery. But notice, John doesn't get a, blue ball of fire around his hand there. Okay? So, Bartimaeus comes in. I'm going to skip a bunch. I'm skipping where he sees Jenkins with Hopkins and, Lime and such. Bartimaeus comes in and is nearly dead. This is where... I'll skip that chapter 2. Yeah, 154 is when they see this big shadow come up against the window, and then it turns into a little small thing. And it turns out to be Bartimaeus. And I think it's Farrar who says John should use the shimmering coil or the essence rack to get information out of it. And he says no, page 157, very bottom of the page. And he dismisses him. Dismisses him where?
The other place.
To the other place. Time to recharge the batteries. And he tells Farrar, he was a valuable servant. I will talk to him when his essence has healed. 158, she says, I would have thought that you valued my regard rather higher than the spilled slime of a fading demon. That creature failed you. It was charged to bring you information. It could not do so. Important intelligence was there for us to take, and you released it. Only temporarily. And then we're told what he's thinking after he says that. He knew he had no real answer to her anger, for his actions had taken even himself by surprise. This made him furious in his turn. Please control yourself. I deal with my slaves in the manner of my choosing. Indeed you do. Your slaves, or perhaps you mean your little friends. Oh, come now. People have been hunting for your weakness for some time now, Mr. Mandrake, and I inadvertently have found it. Extraordinary. I never would have guessed you were such a sentimental fool. How does she mean he's a sentimental fool?
He's holding on to the past.
Do you think that's it?
He cares for the slaves.
He cares for Bartimaeus. If Bartimaeus were James Farrar's servant, slave, what would he be right now? Dead. She would have used the coil thing or the whatever it was to what? Pull that information even if it killed him. Why? She could get another one. She thinks he's sentimental because he actually shows a little bit of compassion for him. Okay? All right, we'll stop there. We'll pick up with part 3 Wednesday. I'm going to try and get through about another third of it on Wednesday. So if there's a quiz on Wednesday, it'll probably be through, I don't know, about page 333, looks like.